Hello and welcome to another episode of Beam There, Done That. I'm one of the co-hosts, Alan Wyma, and today we have with my other co-host, Francesco Cesarini.
I am Francesco Cesarini, co-host as well. We're lucky to have Jose Valim with us today. Jose, how would you introduce yourself to those who do not know you?
Uh, if they are technical, I would usually say I am creator of Elixir and programmer, open source developer. Yeah.
Sorry, there's always so much more of that too, because when I did some more research on you, even though of course I know you quite well, people also still talk about you being former core Rails team member, right? Still a lot more that you've
Yep.
done that people still talk about.
Yeah, I've been involved into a bunch of different things, right? And even today, like I am involved with NX and Livebook and a little bit of Phoenix, but I think like my main work, the thing that when I die I'll be reminded of is the Elixir part.
If you were to pick something, since you
Right.
mentioned this topic, if you were to pick something that you wanted to be remembered by, would it be Elixir or would it be something else?
Technically speaking, I would say Elixir, right? But I have this kind of like going a little bit from the technical angle. Some people, like they have the ambition that like they want to change the world, right? And I don't think there is necessarily like something wrong with that. But my point of view is like, if we all aim to change our communities, make our communities a better place, like can be the tech community, can be your neighborhood, that would be enough. So I also hope that, people will remember that aspect of being kind, of being welcoming and passing it forward if you're going with a non-technical angle.
It's looking at being remembered not only for technical achievement but also for your values and how you share them with the wider community. What are we going to talk about today? I was thinking of focusing. There's a lot of talk around now about coding agents and LLMs and basically using AI and how AI is going to replace programmers. I'm wondering if that could be an interesting topic.
Especially with the recent kind of announcement with Anthropic releasing Elixir application, which I think is huge because even nowadays people don't
OpenAI.
even talk about Elixir like around me. They never even heard a language, or if they heard of it, they think, okay, just another programming language. So yeah, I mean, Jose, it sounds like you had something you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, sorry. Just a brief correction. I believe yesterday it was OpenAI. They announced like an application called Symphony, and it was written in Elixir. But that's how much I know. I haven't looked into it yet. I think it's a sorry. It's a good topic, and we can jump into that. Any particular point?
Can we tell those who don't know about it a little bit, give them a bit more context?
Oh yeah, so I haven't
Yeah.
looked into it yet. I just know it. I saw that there was. I play soccer every Wednesday. I came back from soccer exhausted. I saw there was like some blurb on Twitter, and I was like, okay, OpenAI is using Elixir, but I could not investigate yet. There are people definitely looking into it.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I always remember the buzz, whenever, we found a new user of Erlang out there, be it SAP or be it Oracle or be it, Sun or whoever it is, who back in the days would come in. It's always a kick. Yeah, it's always fun. But we should try to get them to come speak at, one of our events as well. It's a good excuse to always meet them in person. Yeah. My question is, what makes a good programming language, for using AI and with LLMs and coding agents? What are the main features, you think go in and impact the
Yeah,
choice, and the quality of what gets produced?
I think the honest answer is that nobody really knows. Uh, because like there are some studies, so there is a study that makes Elixir very well positioned across programming languages, like across different
Yeah.
models yielding the best results, but we don't really know the root causes, right? So I have
You're referring to
recently
this,
written a blog.
you're referring to the 10-cent study, right? Is that the one you're
Yes.
referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. That was really interesting. Yeah.
And I think there are things that we can do, which is like to speculate. And I think there are a couple things. I'll give my reasons, the ones that I've written about. And I think like they make sense, but it's still my guess, right? It's like the best guess I can give on this, right? So I think, like, so for example, some of it is because of like functional programming and immutability. You are
Mm.
going to remember the quote, Francisco, from Joe, right? Like, when you're writing object-oriented programs, you think you have a gorilla that is holding the banana, right? But you, like, if you could have a banana, but then you have the gorilla holding the banana in the whole jungle, which is, you have a lot of state, and sometimes to understand the software, you have to load a lot of context, a lot of files into the coding agent to understand everything that is happening because of all that state that is widespread through the system. And Elixir tends to be, and functional programming tends to be way more isolated and explicit about the state. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I like functional programming and immutability, just the clarity of the code. And I think that's going to impact coding agents as well.
I kind of agree. I was gonna, yeah. I mean, but if you look at immutability, it has much wider implications and much wider effects. If you go back in the early days, my Ericsson days, when it was really hard to get good programmers. Sometimes, we use the whole concept of concurrence and immutability to be able to replace modules without affecting the whole larger parts of the system. Even if we sometimes maybe broke a little part, it would still be local and it wouldn't expand. Unlike, say, we're talking, gorilla, bananas, and jungles. The issue there was inheritance, where changing a little feature in the jungle
A
would
lot of
then
coupling.
change the color of your. It would
Yeah.
change the color of your. And so this, yeah, and I agree. If you look at agents implementing your code, isolation and having small, loosely coupled and independent components help vastly, because you can then go in and replace just a small component, as you're saying, without affecting the wider scale. But yeah, this has implications with scaling on multi-core architectures. This has implications with security. If you look at KOS and Crichton, for example, they're taking all of the principles from OTP and applying them to security, and telling you how to structure your code, compartmentalizing. So what was originally a way to isolate failure is now a way to isolate your functionality and isolate your data, which makes it harder to be reached when you have breaches.
The second aspect that I brought up is documentation. So
Mm.
we've always treated documentation as first class in Elixir, but the really special thing I think that we have in the Elixir community, and I think the only other community that has something similar, is the Rust community. All the documentation of all packages are on HexPM. If you are building a large language model, right, which those companies, which OpenAI, Anthropic, they are doing, and they are like, okay, we are crawling the internet. If they find one website, which is hexdocs.pm, they can learn everything there should learn about Elixir and the ecosystem. Everything is there in a single place, right? Of course, there are blog posts, there are other things, there are forums, but when it comes to the technical documentation, everything is there. And so I think, like, that helps a lot to learn about the best practices, what is available, what can be done. And coupled with that, like, the ecosystem has been very stable in general, right? Like, Elixir 1.0 was released almost 12 years ago, and we are still on the major version 1, no breaking changes. The same for Phoenix. Acto got, like, I think the last major version came out like 7 years ago. The ecosystem has been stable, which means that
Mm.
everything that has been written about Elixir, it's still true. That did not change. And so the likelihood that the model is going to get it right, is not going to get confused, increases. And that's one of the complaints that we hear with the other frameworks that change so frequently, is that
Mm.
sometimes, like, the model is confused. Like, oh, I am writing something from the version 5, but this project, like, there's a new version, which is version 6, and now the models are confused. So I think all those things, like, we can kind of, like, be very objective that they improve how the coding agents are going to behave. It's still not for sure, but it makes sense.
I was gonna say I
So,
was just
sorry,
complaining
Matt,
about
yeah.
this problem yesterday. We had another guest on yesterday, and I was complaining loudly like I just wanted to get this stupid Python module to work. I installed it and it didn't work because I'm on version 3.16 or 13 and it needs to be 3.9 or 3.6 or something, and it's just so frustrating. Like how can there be such big changes between, what are I think, shouldn't be breaking changes in between. It's not like Python 2 to 3 where of course you're expecting something. But then in the end it's like, well, what did I really get? This was something I think I had to talk with Mats about this when he was around. Sorry, this was in Taiwan when we first met a while ago, Jose. I had to talk with Mats, when he was doing I think Ruby 3, and he said, yeah, that's like one of the major complaints is like, okay, if I'm giving you sorry, if you need to go through all this pain to upgrade, you need to give me something or else I feel like it's not worth it, which is what I feel like with Python. Every time I have to upgrade, it's a pain. I don't feel like I get anything extra as opposed to like between Ruby 2 and 3, I'm a little bit more familiar. Like there's a lot more stuff that's in between. With Elixir, there's been some friction, but very little. But OTP has been like there's OTP 28 had an issue with a lot of libraries with the compilation of regexes. That was kind of a pain, but at least I know I'm getting like a little bit more like performance out of it, like with the JIT and some other places. So that's okay. And also, it wasn't that big of a deal to upgrade stuff, as opposed to like I have no idea what the problem was between with Python. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
We've
Yeah,
always, at least if you look at the Beam, yeah, I think backward compatibility has always been a critical issue, and I think we also discussed it when we recorded another episode that it's not breaking things and making sure everything was backwards compatible. Was critical. I think it's become much easier now with coding agents. You go in, you have a warning for a few releases. The agent will pick the warning up and adapt them.
I was just going to say like that also like the upgrade to OTP 2028 is a good example because
Mm.
when it came out we did realize that there was like an impact in the community, and then the OTP team like recognized it and they added like a feature in the next like 28.1 that we could use in Elixir. So the first ones to migrate, which sometimes happens, right? Sometimes you have unexpected
Mm.
compatibility, unexpected incompatibilities. The first ones to migrate, they did run into that, but then we were able to provide a solution. And if we're migrating to 28 today, should be like way smoother. Exactly because, as you're saying, like compatibility is taken very seriously.
How is the working relationship with OTP team? Because I think it's great to hear that that they're doing these things. Were you using a non-documented feature? Was it non-documented features which broke it, or were they actually documented?
It wasn't documented, to be very honest about it. We were relying on regexes being serializable, which is not is like it could break Erlang code as well, I believe. Like so,
Mm.
if you had an Erlang code that called like term to binary on a regex and then try to load it, it wouldn't work on 28. That could break Erlang, but Elixir we were relying a lot on this behavior.
Mm.
And then what we did and what they did in OTP 28.1 was to add a way to get that behavior back if you needed it. So, like they immediately understood like, why it was happening and the importance of the feature, and they implemented it. And as usual, like working with them has been fantastic.
Going back to what you were talking earlier about the documentation, the fixes which were done, which you needed in the VM, and which then also really helped enhance Erlang's documentation. I think were those the first changes you managed to get through with OTP team?
Actually, I don't
Do
think
you,
so. I think
okay,
like I was checking recently and I probably have like upwards to or close to like 300 commits in OTP.
yeah.
And I've written EEPs before. Most of my work has actually happening on things behind the scenes. So like
Mm.
optimizing the compiler. So I've added like new compiler passage to make the code faster. Like that's kind of what I work on. I usually try to avoid doing language changes because I'm kind of worried to with being like the annoying person who's like created Elixir and now
Mm.
wants like Erlang to change. And even when I'm proposing something to Erlang, like I try to be like very unbiased from like the Elixir needs. Like, so I don't try to say, hey, you should add to Erlang because it's going to make Elixir better. It's usually, look, you should add it to Erlang because it's going to make Erlang and everybody better. That's usually my approach. So I'm working a lot of things behind the scenes, but I think the things like to standardize how documentation is stored,
Mm.
and then I think I don't remember if I was the one who wrote the proposal for the documentation attributes. Those are the bigger, like, it's a
This,
more obvious impact, right? Because when
ex-
I make like the compiler 10% faster,
no,
everybody upgrades, they notice the compiler is faster, but it's not like very user facing. And I think like when I submitted it, I think there was already like people from the OTP team. They said like, "Oh, we are interested in that. Like,
mm,
if you would write it, I think it would be useful. It would help us." And that's usually how I approach more like language facing changes.
interesting. Yeah, I think it's one of the examples on how the ecosystem becomes much better. Thanks to some of the changes. One of the languages which then goes in and benefits all. Yeah, and but this was probably at the time it was probably one of the most visible changes maybe. Which happened, which where I think a lot of people realized the benefits.
Yeah, and definitely
So
thank you for the documentation one, because I mean it wasn't necessarily terrible, but it definitely is improved when you go through looking through the Erlang docs. I mean it's I think the biggest one is of course it looks better and also a little bit easier to read. Nice to be able to have like a unified documentation, because I think a lot of people they, especially if you start with Elixir like I did, you tend to look at, okay, what's there in Elixir, and then like it's an afterthought, or maybe you even forget like what's in Erlang. There's quite a lot of things that are wrapped with Elixir that makes you forget like, okay, it's actually calling Erlang underneath. I think there's the Q library that's actually not wrapped. You have to go straight for it. So that's something that if you don't know about it, it's you probably end up looking for an Elixir library somebody wrote that it's just a wrapper around the Erlang queue, which is just a waste. You don't really need that.
In Elixir, we tend to avoid wrapping unless that we can add value beyond like just the wrapper. That's our like official stance on it. So in many cases, we are going to say, well, you should just use Erlang ETS module, or you should just use Q because there's not much to gain if we wrap it from the Elixir side. But I think yes, like the positive thing about documentation and having Erlang and Elixir is standardized is that also like all the work that we do is shared by everybody, shared by Elixir packages and Erlang packages. Since the very beginning, Elixir also generates the documentation as an EPUB document, so that's available to everyone. Recently, we added a search. So today, like, there's this really cool feature in Hacks. I think it's you. So if you go to any project and I think you do mix hex dot, I think it's hex.search. So if you go to the CLI and you do mix hex search, it opens up a page with all the packages of your project selected, and you can do a search on your packages, all the packages that your application depends on, which is like it's unique. Like I don't think any other ecosystem has this feature, and this is great because it's helpful for humans, but we can also expose that to a code agent. So the code agent's like, hey, I need to do this thing in particular. Instead of it going and adding a package, you can say, oh, by the way, I already have a package that does it. Now the code agent can search the documentation of all packages for your project. And when we implemented it, it works for everybody, right? Because we are all building on the same foundations. Recently, we added the generation of markdown files to the documentation because that's easier for coding agents to consume remotely as well. And again, we added to Xdoc and it becomes available to everybody. So besides like the initial gains, I think like there's this long-term gain is that there is no duplication of work. If we do something for Erlang or we do something for Elixir, when it comes to the documentation, we all benefit from it.
Exactly, as we say, well, together we're stronger, and that's what's so great, when we start talking about the whole ecosystem of languages, which are coming, and we'll soon have some of the key maintainers of Gleam on the show as well. So you were talking about documentation, which and the work on documentation, which started when coding agents were not a thing. When you started work around gradual set theoretic type, just a gradual set theoretic type system, even there, coding agents weren't a thing, but it has certainly helped. Now, have there been any improvements in the type system which have been included recently, with AI in mind?
There are two things. So the first one is that in my experience, when we make things better for humans, we generally tend to make them better for agents, and vice versa. So like I was just talking about the search across all the packages, right, that you have in your project. When we started working on that, like coding agents were not what they are today, right? So we started with the human aspect in mind, because a lot of people would complain that they're using Phoenix, and Phoenix is like three or four different packages. They could not figure out which one a given API was coming from. So that was like our motivation. But today, I would probably even say, like, because of Tidewave, that it's likely agents are using the feature more frequently than humans are. And then like other things like error message, right? Like if you have a good error message, we have always been very careful about error messages in Elixir, and that's something that came later with Erlang as well, because with a good error message fix the problem as well, instead of guessing. I think that's one of my point of views. Like when you try to do something for one, the other gets benefits too, right? But also like there are like these discussions, like we were even hinting about it. What is the best programming language for AI? And I said like why I think like Elixir is good for coding agents, but my general perspective on this is that while humans are still going to be in the loop and we have to review code, we have to work with it, which may be forever, right? I don't know. I don't know
Mhm.
where we will be as an industry in 3 to 5 years from now. But while humans are going to be in the loop, we are going to be the bottleneck. Like the agents can understand code faster than us, the agent can write code faster than us. So while we will be the bottleneck, I still think like the best language for humans is still going to be the
Mm.
best language for AI. And until that changes, which I don't know when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen, I think that's going to be the case. With that in mind, like answering the question if I've done like anything specific in Elixir or change like the roadmap in any way, the answer is no, because I still think like if we
Mm.
do things that are good for humans, which has been like the guiding principle for Elixir, right? Since the beginning, like to have good tooling, good documentation. We're working on a type system to help big teams get feedback quicker, right? My approach is we'll continue working on those things because I still think that's the way forward.
You mentioned something in your answer which stuck with me, which is basically right now we have humans reviewing the work AI has done and giving it feedback and iterating on it. What I keep on hearing is that this job right now can mainly be done by senior developers, by architects, by people with a lot of experience will soon be retiring. And what we've done is we've actually removed the career path for graduates and mid-level engineers to become seniors, to become architects, because their tasks and their roles has been replaced by AI. And this is creating documentation, writing test cases, coding some of the simpler tasks which today has been automated. What's your view on that, and how can we bridge that gap which is being created?
I generally agree with it. I mean, like, I think that's the direction we are going. With then, the only addition I would say is that when they try to measure AI adoption in industries, it's still like, it's still
Mm,
going, right? So we are still in a process, but I agree that
mm,
that's where we are going to go. We may and very likely be removing the onboarding path for new engineers or for junior developers, and honestly, I don't have an
yeah,
answer. I think that's
yeah,
something that I think about it. It's not that I don't
mm,
think about this problem. I try to explore different things, but I don't have anything that I'm like, okay, I feel that's
yeah.
the answer. And that's something that we, and I mean we in general, like all programming languages, all technical, all developers will have to figure out as an industry. So
I like it. We'll have to figure it out. I think it's also what something, universities will have to figure out as well. How do you change and adapt their programs, to fit it in? I remember when ChatGPT came out, and then students started using it for their take-home assignments. Universities got caught off guard. First policy, oh no, you use ChatGPT, it's plagiarism. You're using someone else's work unless you reference it, and you're not allowed to use it. And that was the first guard. But I think now, they probably need to go in and adapt and change how they approach it. But it's going to be really, really hard. I don't have an answer either on how you still teach, the theoretical aspects and teach the foundations without losing the productivity you gain. We'll figure it out. I think that's where I'll leave that before digging myself into a even bigger hole.
You've been kind of quiet, Lisa. I haven't seen anything from your side for a while. What are you actually staying busy with these days, Jose?
two main things. So one is the type system for Elixir. So we are like on a string of recent releases because we are increasing the amount of typing information on every Elixir release. So right now, like we are going through a series of release candidates for Elixir 1.20. There was a new one yesterday, so I'm constantly working on that, getting feedback, making the compiler and the type system faster. It's ongoing work that has been happening for 3+ years, and now it's getting like a lot of momentum. And so that's part of it, and the other part of it is the work that we are doing with Tidewave, which is a product at Dashbit, and our goal is to build like the best coding agent for web application development. So we want to build like a full stack coding agent. And in a nutshell, it's like we do have coding agents like Claude Code or Cursor, but they are like generic coding agents, right? They are meant to work with any language, any framework, right? It can be used for building CLI, it can be used for building games. There's a lot those agents can improve if we make them actually understand how your web application works, how things get rendered on the page. That's what we have been building with Tidewave and exploring exactly like how to bridge the gap between AI coding agents and the compiler web frameworks and so on. And of course, we support Phoenix, but we are also like trying to go outside our comfort zone. So we have support for Rails, Django, Next.js, and so on, exactly because we are trying to understand how AI and coding agents fit into everything that we are doing.
You mentioned, quite a few, frameworks and programming languages. Will eventually our coding agents just, produce assembly?
I don't think so. Maybe in the future. I don't think in the next 3 years from now, right? Because going back to what I have as my current state of mind is that as long as humans are going to be in the loop, we should
Yeah.
prioritize the human. We cannot really review assembly. I mean, not most of us. It's not going
Mm.
to be like very productive, right? It would be hard to debug and so on. The other way to think about it is that I like to think a lot about. I don't know how good an analogy this is. I like to think like a lot about like photography in the sense that like when we got digital cameras is not necessarily that like in a way we got like way more photographers, right? Because not everybody has a camera in their pocket and everybody can take picture. And it's not like professional photographers, they don't exist. They do exist, it's just that they are like very specialized, right? And if you were like a good photographer before, now you're going to be even more in demand because they are like those special occasions like the parties, the weddings where they're going to be brought. I think like that's one of the ways we could go as an industry because like we will still need operating systems, we will still need abstractions, we will still need languages, right? We still need databases, and of course like AI is going to play a role in there, but I don't think AI is going like to be able to fully take over those things, and the humans they're still going to be involved. But for many of the other aspects, AI is going to play a more important role, which goes back to our discussion. Like, well, what does that mean about junior developers then? I think also like it's exactly the other thing with AI that we when we talk about AI and programming, we just say AI and programming, But the truth is that there are so many categories to programming,
Mm,
and AI is
yeah.
going to have definitely a different impact on many of them.
I mean, what I'm taking home from this is, and I completely agree with you, you need, two things. You need the right abstraction layers, which is why programming languages exist. They were created as abstraction layers, towards machine code. And second is from the compartmentalizing items, which will then allow the human to go in and understand. But I like your time frame, 2 to 3 years. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's exciting times we're in.
What I also like too, kind of going back to an earlier topic, I just decided while we're all discussing to take a look at the version 2.0 milestone list. You already have 3 issues on there that are dating back, like, let's see, we got 2019, sorry, 2018, 2021, and 2019. I'm guessing you're in no rush to work on Elixir V2, right? Is that actually like going to happen, or is that kind of, yeah, it's something that we can consider maybe, but if we were, this is the things we'd be tackling.
My point of view with Elixir V2 is that, like, so today, if there is something that we don't like or want to change in the language, we can always add a new way of doing it and deprecate the old one. And that's usually how we have approached those things. So we have like a reasonably sized list of deprecations and things that we are like, this is a bad idea, this is a bad pattern, and it's going to emit a warning if you use them in Elixir today. But we don't have to break the language, release a new major version. And there are, like as you said, like 2 or 3 things that we're like, this was a bad idea. We don't like, and of course we don't want to change it now because it may potentially break applications, and those are the 2 3 items. So if eventually we release Elixir 2.0, we are going to change those 2 3 things, but I don't remember the list in my head, but like those are very minor things. It's like some of them, it's like probably not even less than 1% of the code base they are using it, but we have to be careful. But like, so in my mind, it's like we are going to have an Elixir 2.0 at some point in the future, but when that happens, my goal is that if you're running Elixir 1.0 or 1.x, sorry, if you're running the latest Elixir 1. Something version and it compiles and runs without warnings, then you should be able to upgrade to Elixir 2.0 without breaking changes for like 99% of the cases. That's my my head canon. So if we have a 2.0, it's basically to say, okay, we accumulated all these deprecations throughout like 10 years, 15 years. 10 years has already passed, so it has to be more than that. For over the last like 15, maybe 20 years, and now we want to remove them. But if you are using the latest Elixir 1 and it doesn't have any warnings, then the migration should be 100% painless.
I like it. When we're talking about 1.0 and 2.0, it brings back memories of, what happened with Perl, jumping from Perl 5, to Perl 6, which, at the time it wasn't just a major update, it was a fundamental architectural and philosophical break, and it, completely fractured, the community and had impacts over adoption. These changes need to be done carefully and slowly. So I'm behind you all the way there. You need to make things which are backward compatible and slowly phased out. Yeah, you can't have a big jump. I have one question, which is a bit more philosophical, and I think it's soon time to wrap up. But what lessons from the past? What's the biggest lesson from the past which is helping you shape the future?
No, I'll have to think about it. I don't have
Okay. I,
I
I, I
don't have
should
anything.
I should have pre-warned you here, but yeah, I'm very much a believer that lessons from the past help shape the future, and understand where we're heading. But
Sure, it's just that, it requires processing. It's like like
it
when you
does,
like
it
many
does.
of the questions, like I think about it or somebody have asked me before, so I have already spent the processing power. I just need
Gemini
to
is
load it from the
overloaded.
cache.
Yeah,
Yes, in
Gemini is
this case,
overloaded.
like
Come back
the
later.
cache is empty.
We will save this for next time we have you on the show. How's that? Is that a deal?
Sounds good.
I think
Right.
if we ask any more questions, we'll definitely go over the time we have allotted. So we could probably start to wrap this up. Jose, it's great to see you again. I feel like every year or every 2 years, we have some kind of crossover with different things. So it's good to see you again. So I won't see you for another year, maybe it seems. So, yeah.
Thanks
Yeah.
for having me. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. And just for the record, this episode was recorded on March 5th, 2026. Yeah.
All right, folks.
Thanks a
Have a good
million.
one. Bye bye.
Have a good day. Bye
All
bye.
right.